Okay, welcome back everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our evening session. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Eightfold Path, but first we're going to do meditation together. So you guys have already been meditating with me a little bit, so I'm just going to ease into the meditation with some chanting. I'll give you some guidance, then there'll be a period of time where it'll just be quiet, and then we'll come out with some guidance with some chanting from there. And then we'll talk about the Eightfold Path, which is the path to enlightenment. This is what you would need to know in order to be able to move the mind to the enlightened mental state. So if you'd like to join for meditation, you're welcome to join. You're welcome to join in with the chanting as well. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhammasati Satatava Manusanang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, in the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหะวาพุทธังมหากวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหากวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Okay, so welcome back again to all of you guys that are here. Welcome to everyone online who's joining us as well. This is our evening session for this retreat of purification of the mind, and we're going to dive into the Eightfold Path, which is the core central teaching of the Buddha. And this is something that in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to know inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. You're going to need to know it like the back of your hand. And depending on where you are in your journey, this might be the very first time you've ever been exposed to it. And that's fine. You know, learn whatever it is that you're going to be able to learn today. But if this is maybe your second or third or fourth time hearing this is where you should start working on memorizing each individual step and really working to retain the understanding of each individual step, because I'm going to walk you guys through and teaching you guys this, and it's helpful no matter where you're at on the journey to be able to make sure you understand this and you can practice it, because this is what's going to lead to the complete transformation of your mind and the complete transformation of your life. So as we always do, you're always welcome to ask questions here at the temple if you could use the microphones. And then those of you guys online, if you could put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any and all questions that you like. So as we left off this morning, when we were headed off from our morning session, we talked about right view. And I explained to you that there's these 8 individual factors, and they're organized into 3 sections. And this is the path to enlightenment. And behind each one of these, the Buddha is actually speaking about what this actually is. So now I'm going to use his words to walk you through this so that you can see what the Buddha actually taught. So here with the first step, which we talked about in detail this morning, the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha is actually pointing to the Four Noble Truths. He's not explaining the Four Noble Truths here, but he's just pointing to it. He's saying, in what, monks, is right view? It is, monks, the wisdom of discontentedness, the wisdom of the cause of discontentedness, the wisdom of the way, the wisdom of the elimination of discontentedness, and the wisdom of the way of practice leading to the elimination of discontentedness. This is called right view. So here what he's doing is he's pointing to the Four Noble Truths, and he's saying that's right view. So you can see below this line, I've got the top section of the Four Noble Truths from the Buddhist teachings. This goes on from the words of the Buddha, and it's in that first book, and it's in other resources that I share where you can see the original words of the Buddha on the Four Noble Truths. But then what I do is I teach students when they're first getting started a summarized version of the Four Noble Truths so that you can see what they actually are in terms of a way that you can immediately understand them and practice them. But as you get going with the path to enlightenment, you're going to need to understand it in the way that the Buddha taught it, which is in a lot more detail. And it's kind of related to things that people generally understood at the time, which are things like the five aggregates and perceptions and things like this, where nowadays what I do is I just kind of lead you through understanding the three universal truths, which are building blocks to understand the Four Noble Truths. I explain to you what craving, desire, attachment is. I did all this morning, and then I walk you through step by step understanding the first, second, third, and fourth noble truth, and I give you examples all the way through, and that's where we left off this morning. And ultimately now you move into right intention. This is the second step, right? So if you haven't learned that first step of right view and you haven't understood it yet and you haven't penetrated into it, you're going to need to do that. And I recorded that this morning. So if anybody's attending online or if you're here and you weren't here this morning, you can always go back and learn what I taught this morning. But now we're going to move into right intention, because right intention is the second factor or the second step of the Eightfold Path. And here's the words of the Buddha. He says, in what, monks, is right intention? The intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, the intention of harmlessness. This is called right intention. Some people translate this as the right thinking or the right thought, because this is all about what's going on in your mind. We need to practice this intention or this thinking or thought of renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. These are the three aspects of this step that you're going to need to memorize. What renunciation is where you have the willingness to let go of your unwholesomeness, willing to give up and let go of any false beliefs or false perceptions of reality, because the mind in the unenlightened state is going to hold on to all kinds of false beliefs and false perceptions. But you're not getting rid of your false beliefs and bringing in new beliefs. That's not what you're doing on the path to enlightenment. You're learning, you're reflecting, and you're practicing to acquire wisdom. So when you get wisdom and you realize like, oh my goodness, I've been believing this thing all along for all this time, I need to get rid of that because now I've got wisdom that shows me that that's untrue. So let me get rid of my beliefs and bring in wisdom. One of the first false beliefs that you need to eliminate now that you have wisdom is that other people are causing you to be angry. That's one of the first false beliefs we have to let go of by practicing the intention of renunciation. Right view in the Four Noble Truths teaches us that our own mind is causing these discontent feelings. And if you've penetrated into the first step of right view and understanding the Four Noble Truths, then you can see very clearly that it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing these discontent feelings. So that's one of the first things that you need to let go of. But there's many other things that you need to let go of too. Essentially, what the Buddha is teaching you here with the intention of renunciation is living with an open mind, and realize that if you're experiencing anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, any of those discontent feelings, if you're experiencing those, there are certain false beliefs that your mind has. You don't have a full wisdom in your mind of full true reality. You don't yet understand the natural laws of existence. So you're going to need to be willing to let those things go and transform your mind by practicing this intention of renunciation. Then you're going to need the intention of non-ill will. What ill will is where you have animosity, bitterness, anger, hatred, all those lesser versions like frustration, irritation, annoyment, even dislike towards other beings. You're going to need to have the intention of practicing non-ill will, which is the opposite of these things. What non-ill will is goodwill. because in the English language, if there's a double negative, that makes it a positive. So non-ill will is the same as goodwill. And what goodwill is loving kindness, where you have this active goodwill towards all beings without judgment, where you just love beings as they are. And you have the intention of practicing this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, in this active goodwill. Then you practice the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to others. Because as long as you're causing harm to others, that harm is going to come back to you. What the Buddha is setting you up for in this wisdom section is to realize that anytime you cause harm through your moral conduct, for example, that harm's going to come back to you. So when we have been bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive and argumentative in our relationships, we can see that that caused harm, and now that harm's going to come back to us. And that's why people are bitter and harsh and hostile to you in certain relationships, because that's the way you're being in your relationships as well. So when you purify your mind and you clean up your mind, and you're no longer bitter and harsh and hostile, and you're not putting that out for an extended period of time, more and more as you've cleaned up your mind, you'll clean up your relationships. It's going to take a fair amount of time to be able to clean all that up, because we've been doing that for a certain period of time. We have a certain amount of unwise decisions that we've made in the past, and we're going to experience this unwholesome karma coming back to us. And as that's coming back to us, we choose to do something different now. And by practicing this intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested in causing harm, now you're set up on this wisdom section of the Eightfold Path to now build in the moral conduct. So you're going to need to memorize these three things of right intention, because you're going to need to practice it on a daily basis. Is the intention of renunciation, where you're willing to let go and give up your false beliefs, your false opinions, your false perceptions, by bringing in wisdom and having an open mind, by practicing non-ill will or goodwill, and practicing harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm, because any harm you put out is just going to come back to you. So this is right intention. And this is a summary of the first two steps of the Eightfold Path. What right view is the Four Noble Truths, where you're understanding that it's your own mind that's causing these discontent feelings. It's craving, desire, attachment. It's not anything external. Anytime you're looking externally for what's causing your discontent feelings, you're looking in the wrong place, and you're not going to be able to solve your problem. You need to look inward and be introspective. Start looking inward to try to discover, what am I craving here? There's something you're wanting, you're longing, you're having some expectation, and that's what's causing the discontentedness. In part of this, I teach as right view to accept responsibility for your own speech, your own feelings, your own actions, your own intentions. You need to accept responsibility for those things, because we typically blame other people. When we get angry, when you get frustrated or agitated or annoyed, you might look for somebody else to blame. And again, that's looking in the wrong place. You need to be able to look inward. So if you accept responsibility for what you're experiencing, this is part of practicing right view. And then, as I mentioned, right intention is practicing the intention of renunciation, non-ill will, which is loving kindness, and then harmlessness. And then what this does is it sets you up to now build the moral conduct. The moral conduct is how you interact in the world through your speech, your actions, and your livelihood. And when you're making wise decisions about your moral conduct, that's when you'll experience wholesome results, or wholesome karma, right? So the Buddha is going to share with you, under right speech, right action, and right livelihood, how to ensure that your moral conduct isn't causing harm to others. Because with the wisdom of right view, that, hey, it's my mind that's causing these discontent feelings, being bitter and harsh and hostile to others isn't going to solve the problem. And now let me practice this intention of renunciation, of getting rid of that unwholesome moral conduct. Let me practice non-ill will or goodwill towards other beings, and let me practice harmlessness, where I'm disinterested in causing harm to others. So when you have that wisdom, now you move into the moral conduct, and you look at, how can I improve the decisions that I'm making about my moral conduct? So whenever you're learning the moral conduct of any aspect of the teachings of the Buddha, whether it's the Eightfold Path or the 5 precepts or anything else, it's important to help you understand that what the Buddha is teaching you is the natural law of karma. He's teaching you this cause and effect. These aren't rules. These aren't commandments. He's not trying to force you to do anything. He's not guilting or shaming you into anything. He's showing you the cause and effect relationship between you making wise and unwise decisions, and leads to wholesome and unwholesome karma, or wholesome and unwholesome results. The natural law of karma, no being is controlling this. It's not punishments and rewards. It's not anything mystical or magical. It's literally the results of your decisions. That as you're making decisions in your life, either wisely or unwisely, you're going to experience results. And the more wisely that you can make decisions, then you're going to experience more and more wholesome results. But whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, which we talked about this morning with the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots, whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome results. Because remember that craving is like your selfish desires. You're wanting things to be pleasing for yourself. The anger is like the bitterness and the hostility and the harshness. And that ignorance is the lack of wisdom or the unknowing of true reality. That's the source of all unwholesome results. If you look at anything unwholesome that's happening in your life or anywhere in the world, it's because of a being making a decision through craving, anger, and ignorance. Every single thing. So what the Buddha is teaching you on the Eightfold Path, if you remember back to the Four Noble Truths, he's teaching you how to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So when you look here at right speech, you'll be able to see that what he's teaching you is how to eliminate your cravings. Because as long as you're making decisions through cravings, it's going to keep producing unwholesome results. So here he says, in what, monks, is right speech? Refraining from lying, refraining from slander, refraining from harsh speech, refraining from frivolous speech. This is called right speech. Well, remember, you're not interested in believing any of these teachings, that you can learn it, you can reflect on it, and you can practice. So here you understand what lying is, right? This is telling a falsehood. This is a false, not telling the truth. You can look at this and you can see that whenever you've done that, it's led to unwholesome results for you. That people discover our lies, they find us to be untrustworthy, and then we have difficulties in our personal and professional relationships. And if you've done a lot of lying, you notice that your mind had to be obsessively figuring out, what did I tell this person? What did I tell this person? What did I tell that person? You're having to keep all your lies straight. And how could you ever get to a peaceful and joyful mind if your mind's obsessively trying to figure out what you said to who? And if you look at the root of lying, what it comes from is craving. That there's something the mind is craving. It's longing, yearning for something. And if you tell the truth, you're not going to get it. So we end up lying because we want this thing. So in order to get to the point where you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment, and you're not causing harm, and you can build this wholesome karma, you need to eliminate any kind of falsehoods and any kind of lying and be sure that you're always speaking the truth. Then there's slander. This is like gossip, diminishing somebody's reputation. If we're diminishing someone's reputation, there's a craving there. The mind wants to make this person look bad so I can look good. The mind's got this ego and this arrogance. The mind feels like if I put out that person's candle, my candle will shine brighter. But if you've got 2 candles in the room is brighter, right? By putting out someone else's candle, it doesn't make the room brighter. But this is the lack of wisdom that the unenlightened mind has. It has these cravings, these desires that the mind wants to look good to other people, and now it might try to diminish and degrade other people. And this is coming from craving. And as long as you're doing this, you're going to experience unwholesome results. This is where you can see people have been beat up and even murdered for slandering. Remember, the Buddha is not teaching you the way the world should be. He's teaching you the way the world is. So if you look around the world, you see somebody like an investigative reporter who's maybe slandering or gossiping on the news about somebody. This person sometimes ends up dead, right? Buddha's not telling you the way things should be. He's explaining to you the way things are. That if you gossip and slander people, you can find yourself in fights and arguments. You can even get murdered. At the very least, if you're gossiping and slandering about people, the people that you're gossiping and slandering with, those people, when your back's turned, they're going to be gossiping and slandering about you. It's only a matter of time because you get these people used to hearing you gossip and slander. So when your back's turned, they're going to gossip and slander about you. So this is the results of your decisions. By choosing to gossip and slander, these unwholesome results are going to come back to you. And you can eliminate that from your practice so that you're not gossiping and slandering so people don't gossip and slander about you. And then you won't have to worry about whether someone's going to come beat you up or fight you or get in an argument or, what you said about one person versus another. Then there's harsh speech that oftentimes the mind has. When there's craving, desire, attachment in your mind, you might be bitter and harsh and hostile, having animosity and resentment towards people. In the relationships that you're the closest in, like your parents, your siblings, your life partner, your children, people like this, where you have the strongest attachments and the strongest cravings, you'll find it the hardest to eliminate harsh speech. Like with me, you guys aren't harsh at all. You guys are very loving and very kind, but I don't think you're attached to me, right? You don't have this attachment to me. You're not wanting me to be a certain way. You just are like, okay, whatever David does, that's what he does, and I don't want him to be any different, and however he is, he is. But with mom and dad or brothers and sisters and life partners, you want them to be a certain way. That's where the craving is coming in. And now it's really hard that the mind is having this harsh speech. So when you eliminate your harsh speech, you're eliminating craving. There's underlying craving that's causing that harsh speech. So the Buddha is teaching you to restrain the mind and refrain from this harsh speech. So you're going to need to look at your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. And you're going to need to improve that so that you can speak gently in all situations. And you're going to need to train your mind to be able to do this. It's not going to be snap your fingers and instantly be able to do this. This is why it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Then there's frivolous speech. This is just like idle chatter, like pointless talk, where you might have just been like yada 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 yada. It's like broadcasting. It's not really a conversation. If you've ever done that, or you've ever been around somebody that's done that, it's like, oh my goodness, when is this person going to be quiet? Like, oh my goodness, they're just talking and talking and talking. There's no purpose behind it. There's no benefit to it. It's just pointless, frivolous speech or idle chatter. And doing that, it's based in craving. The mind just wants to talk. Listen to me. I've got something to say. Yada, 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 yada. Right? And if you do this, your mind is having craving, desire, attachment. So you like to restrain the mind and have conversations. You're going to have better relationships this way when you're not using frivolous speech. So the Buddha is teaching you here with these 4 aspects of right speech, how to eliminate craving, desire, attachment in regards to your speech. Eliminating lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. This is the first level of purification that you're going to need to get to in order to eliminate the third fetter. When we talk about the third fetter in this class, this is what you need to practice in order to eliminate the third fetter. You're going to need to clean this part up in your practice. And as you're practicing this, if you see the truth in this, because you've learned it, now we've reflected on it a little bit as I'm sharing with you the unwholesome results that you experience because of this. Now, if you start practicing it in your day-to-day life, where you're telling the truth, where you're not slandering, where you're speaking gently, and you're not having frivolous speech, this is where you'll see your relationships improve. So that wrong behavior of the third fetter, this is the moral conduct that you need to be able to practice in order to eliminate that. But ultimately, you would like to get much deeper into practicing right speech, because the Eightfold Path is a core central teaching that other teachings plug into. Like you saw, the Four Noble Truths plugs into the Eightfold Path. Well, there's this teaching on the 5 factors of well-spoken speech that also plugs in here. And there's other teachings that plug in other places too, because the Eightfold Path is a core central teaching. So this is a teaching on the 5 factors of well-spoken speech that goes much deeper into how to improve your speech, because this is where people are oftentimes very challenged in relationships. You can cause a lot of difficulties in your relationships through your speech. So if you can purify your speech and start speaking in improved ways, wiser ways, you'll see that your relationships improve. So the first one that the Buddha teaches here is speaking at the proper time. He puts these in order for a reason. So when you try to work on remembering these, you should remember them in order. He puts them in a specific order for a reason. Because if it's not the proper time to talk, don't pass go, don't collect $200, don't even do anything. Just walk away. What the proper time is making sure you're not interrupting people. That's the first aspect. The second aspect of this is making sure your mind is ready to talk. If you're angry, if you're frustrated, if you're agitated, not the proper time to talk. Don't pass go. Don't collect $200. Don't even engage in a conversation because your mind's too angry and frustrated and agitated. Doesn't even make sense to talk at that point because the only thing that's going to come out is frustration and agitation, and it's just going to blow up in this conversation. And the third aspect of proper time is making sure the other person's mind is the proper time for them to talk. If somebody else is angry and frustrated and agitated or annoyed, but you're like perfectly calm, it's not the proper time to talk, right? You would like to be sure that the other person's mind is the proper time to talk. And if you notice that they're angry and frustrated, sometimes if you're craving, you might feel like you have to go in there and fix that and get them to calm down. But you can't get them to calm down because what's causing their anger is their craving, desire, attachment. You're not causing their anger. That's why you can't fix it. You can't step in there and fix their anger. They have to fix it themselves. They have to let go of their craving. That's what's going to fix their anger. So if you have craving or attachment to this person, you might feel like when they're angry, you want to hurry up and go in there and fix that. But if you understand what the Buddha is teaching you, that it's unwise to do that, it's best to just walk away. And if they get angry and even more angry, that's even more justification for you to walk away. There's conversations where I was getting ready to talk, noticing the person really angry and frustrated. And as I walked away, they got angrier and angrier. And as I was walking away in my mind, I was like, wow, this was such a wise decision because they're so attached. Even me just walking away, they got so angry and so frustrated. Let that be the confirmation for you that you're making a wise decision to walk away. Because sometimes as you're walking away, they're going to try to say things to pull you back into the conversation, right? They might say, oh, you don't even love me. Look, you're walking away from me. You don't even care about this relationship. No, it takes a lot of love and a lot of care to walk away from a conversation of somebody that you really love. That's one of the most loving things that you can do is walk away from this conversation because you value this relationship so much. You're not interested in damaging it. And that's why you're choosing to walk away. So keep your mind clear on that staying in the conversation doesn't mean that you love the person. It means that you're attached. So what you would like to do is be able to practice speaking at the proper time. Then what you say is true. That's covered on the first one, right? On the top line, making sure you're always speaking the truth. And this goes to like conspiracy theories and things like this. You're not interested in spreading that stuff. You're not interested in speaking falsehoods or things you haven't experienced. Maybe somebody told somebody something and that person told that person and that person told that person. There's no reason for you to repeat those kinds of things because you haven't verified it for yourself. You like to be sure that anytime you're speaking, that you're speaking from your own experiences and you know that this is the truth based on your own experiences. Speaking gently is also covered in the top one. This is where you pay attention to your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. Right? You need to be very attentive to that. And in the English language, we have different ways that we can pay attention to that. We can, use please and thank yous. We can use sir and ma'am. We can watch our tone and our tempo and our word choice. In the Thai language, it's pretty easy, right? We have different words to show that we're being warm and polite and kind and loving and respectful. But in the English language, you got to make sure you look at it very closely because a lot of those words that once existed, people don't really use them much anymore. So you might have to talk to your grandparents and find out, what did they used to talk about? How did they used to talk to each other, right? Because in those situations, you can see that in the past, in English, we used to speak a lot more polite than perhaps we do now. Sometimes there's a lot of bitterness and harshness and hostility in the English language. So you're going to need to clean up your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. Then you would like to be sure that what you're speaking about is beneficial. And when the Buddha is talking about beneficial here, he's talking about being sure that you're clear, concise, and precise in your communication. It's not about the topic that you're talking about. Because if we just met, I might say, hey, where are you from? Right? What do you do? Are you traveling in Thailand? What are you doing? Someone might say, oh, that's unbeneficial. No, that's beneficial because we're establishing a relationship. It's not about the topic necessarily that you're talking about. Even though there are topics that are unbeneficial, it's more about that you're clear, concise, and precise, that you're not speaking with frivolous speech. So that's what beneficial means. Then speaking with a mind of loving kindness. This is the opposite of this would be inner hate or anger. And you're not interested in speaking with inner hate or anger, right? You would like to have this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. So these are the 5 factors of well-spoken speech that after you're already practicing this first 4, you would like to go deeper and practice these 5. And once again, you can independently verify this. You can, once you understand these 5 factors, you can look at conversations where it exploded and it went terrible for you and you didn't get wholesome results in that conversation. There was unwholesome things that happened. And you can see that you and or the other person wasn't practicing these 5 factors. If you even missed just one of these factors, there was the potential that that conversation didn't go well. So you can take a conversation that you remember where it didn't go well, and you can look at your own moral conduct, your own speech, and you can see you weren't practicing at least one of these 5 factors, and the other person probably wasn't either, and that's why it didn't go well. But then you can look at the reverse of this, because you've been in conversations that have gone really well. Look at conversations that have went really well. You were practicing these, and so was the other person, but you weren't aware. Right? These are natural laws. They're affecting us whether we're aware of them or not. But now that you're aware of these natural laws, you can consciously start practicing these. And that's where you're going to see real improvement in your life. So you can integrate these into your life and consciously practice them. What you're essentially working on building is something that we refer to here in Thailand as barami. If you know Thai, there's this word barami. What barami means is the one who people listen to. In each village in Thailand, there's people who are the ones who people listen to. There's typically some elders there that are very wise. They're very successful in life. And when I say successful, I mean they're successful in their relationships. It doesn't mean they're financially successful, because that's not how I would suggest that you look at your success. Look at your relationships. That's what determines whether you're a successful person or not. If you have harmonious relationships, this means you're a successful person because you're wise and you're able to have harmonious relationships. So there's usually people in the Thai village that have barami, the one who people listen to. And these people are very successful in their relationships. And other villagers know that if you're having any problems or any issues, it would be wise to go talk to them because they're going to have some wisdom to be able to share with you and help you in your life. So if you're interested in being influential and helpful in your community, whether it's your family or your friends or your coworkers, you can establish barami by speaking wisely. When you start speaking with the 5 factors of well-spoken speech for an extended period of time, more and more people around you are going to get used to you speaking this way, and you'll see that you can be more and more influential with the people around you. Not only is your mind going to be more peaceful and joyful, not only are your relationships going to improve, that more and more people are going to be relating to you in wholesome ways, but you're going to see you're going to be more influential because people are going to listen to you about what you have to say. Whereas if you're interrupting people and you're bitter and harsh and hostile and you're speaking with slander and all these other things that we're talking about here, people are going to tune you out. Right? But if you speak wisely, the way that the Buddha is teaching you here, more and more people will look to you for advice and they'll see you as being influential. So while we refer to this during the lifetime of the Buddha as right speech, one of the ways that you might think about this is right communication. Because nowadays we have much more than just speech. We have emails, we have text messages, we have social media posts, we have phone calls, we have all kinds of ways of communicating. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, all there was speech, right? So that's what he called right speech. But we might think of this as right communication, because right communication ensures that anytime you're communicating, that you communicate wisely. So if you're running over to your keyboard to pound out an email because you're so angry because you just found something out, that's not the proper time to communicate, right? And if you're being harsh or bitter, that's not the right communication. So you would like to be sure that anytime you're communicating, that you're communicating using these 5 factors of well-spoken speech. Because if you went into a job interview and you did really, really well in this job interview, and they were interested in hiring you, but they went and looked at your social media and you were bitter and harsh and hostile there, this is going to impact you. So if you're communicating in all places wisely using these 5 factors of well-spoken speech and what the Buddha is teaching you here under right speech or right communication, you'll see significant improvements in all parts of your life. Okay, so this is called right speech, but you might think of it as right communication. In the book, in volume 1, chapter 5, which is what I'm teaching you here, I go in a lot of detail about speech because it can be so impactful in your life. But here I just have a little bit of the content just to remind you that if for any reason you forget about the 5 factors of well-spoken speech or anything else that the Buddha teaches about speech, if you can just remember to speak polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, this will be really helpful for you. Right? Of course, you need to know the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. That's what's going to get you to enlightenment and eliminating lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. You're going to need to memorize that. But if you're stuck somewhere and you can't look to the resources to be able to remind yourself of the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, just try to remember polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. Kind speech. Polite speech, respectful speech. This is what you would like to speak. But then it's the 5 factors of well-spoken speech that's going to explain to you exactly how to do that. So this is right speech or right communication. Then we move into right action. Right action here, the Buddha gives you 3 impactful actions. He says, in what, monks, is right action? Refraining from taking life, refraining from taking what is not given, refraining from sexual misconduct. This is called right action. What he's teaching you here is to not cause harm through your bodily actions. And he's giving you 3 impactful things that you could cause harm with your bodily actions. But if you understand this step and you understand the natural law of karma, you know that it would be unwise to cause any bodily harm with your body, right? If you walked up to someone and punched them in the face, it's going to produce unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. They're probably going to punch you back. They might have a knife or a gun. They might have friends or family around that attack you. This is something that could happen. But notice the Buddha didn't put this in here because it's not possible for him to create an extensive list of every single way that you could cause harm through your body. So he gives you 3 very large, impactful ones, and then he knows that you're wise enough to figure out the others, right? He didn't talk about, don't drag your suitcase through the aisle of a plane and run over people's feet, because planes didn't exist during his lifetime. But you can figure that out. You would know if you dragged your suitcase down the aisle of a plane and ran over people's feet, there'd be some people that would be pretty grumpy and irritable, and you'd be getting some pretty strange looks. You might even get kicked off the plane. You might get hurt. You never know what might happen. So these are just 3 very impactful ones that the Buddha teaches, but then you can relate this to any other aspect of your life, right? If you're around Thai society, those of you guys that are here in Thailand, you might notice that as people walk through a large crowd, they even hold their loose clothing up against their body because they're not even interested in their loose clothing hitting up against somebody else. That's how attentive they are to ensure that they're practicing right action, that they're actually holding their clothing up against their body as they move through a crowd because they're not interested in bumping into each other. And if you do that, of course, you're going to do that from time to time. Just say, I'm sorry, I apologize. That's how you clean up your karma. So these are 3 impactful ones because what the Buddha is helping you do is he's helping you to become a better and better human being. That's what his teachings are about. And these 3 are based in animalistic instincts, that in our animal existences, we killed, we stole, and we had sexual misconduct. This is pretty much what an animal's doing. So if we can improve these 3, you're moving closer and closer to be a human being, because this is part of those wrong behaviors that you need to eliminate to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And if you die in the first stage of enlightenment, remember you're coming back into the human world because you've become a better and better human being. That's why these 3 are here, because these are all based on animalistic instincts. We're not animals. We're human beings, but our consciousness, having been in many different animal existences, functions in the unenlightened state very much like an animal. But when you become this better and better human being, when your mind is more awake and more purified, you will function as a better and better human being, and you won't be functioning like an animal. So here, the Buddha explains this in more detail if you study the 5 precepts. Here, it's very general, it's very basic, but there's the 5 precepts that plug into this and give you more insight into killing and stealing and sexual misconduct. So we're not studying the 5 precepts in this retreat because I've already covered that in the foundational programs. So students who are usually studying with me here have already studied that. But if you haven't studied that with me, you can watch the video or listen to a podcast where I taught you the 5 precepts, or you can look at the book because they're in the book, the first book, because oftentimes people think the 5 precepts are no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, and no lying, and no intoxicants. But this isn't what the Buddha actually taught. He didn't use that kind of language. He used more detailed language, more specific language that really illuminates what it is that he's teaching you on moral conduct. So you can actually learn that in the 5 precepts. And I always like to point out that when you see sexual misconduct here, this doesn't include same-gender relationships. Sometimes people think when they're in a tradition like this and they're studying teachings like this, that somehow this includes same-gender relationships, when this isn't actually true. Because the Buddha 2,500 years ago understood that 2 loyal, loving, consenting adults that are coming together and having sex, they're not causing harm to anybody. And he also understood the universal truth of impermanence, that it's not possible for every male to be interested in having sex with a female, or every female to be interested to have sex with a male. That would be permanence. There's going to be some people who prefer to have sex with the opposite gender, and some people who prefer to have sex with the same gender. That's completely normal. So if you or somebody you know prefers same-gender relationships, there's no harm there. It's a loyal, loving, consenting relationship. But unfortunately, there's people in the world that they have a craving for every man to have sex with a female and every female to have sex with a male. And when they don't get their craving fulfilled, they get angry and hateful, and they have ill will. And where this is coming from is their ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, that lack of wisdom. Right? So you can have wisdom and realize that ever since the beginning of time, individuals have been having sex with the same gender. You can see it in the teachings of the Buddha. 2,500 years ago, he essentially talks about it in his teachings, that there's never been a time in history where everybody had sex with the opposite gender. Never. It's never happened since the beginning of human history, right? So it's never going to happen either, because it's impermanence. This is all impermanence. But with people's minds craving permanence, there's a lot of people out there that are somewhat hateful towards individuals who prefer same-gender relationships. But you don't need to do that, because you can have wisdom and see the truth in the matter. So this is sexual misconduct. Here, the Buddha is referencing just sexual misconduct, but you can look in the 5 precepts and you can see where he talks about having sex with minors, having sex with people outside of your existing relationships, having sex without consent, things like this. And I teach this in other classes and other programs, and it's in the book. You can see it there. But I usually like to point this out about same-gender relationships because it's so important to understand that. And this is how wise the Buddha was. 2,500 years ago, he understood this. Right? There's people nowadays that don't understand this, right? 2,500 years ago, this man already understood same-gender relationships, no harm. Right? No harm, right? So this is how wise this individual was, okay? So this is right action. But there's more things under this. There's some more from the teachings of the Buddha where he talks about substances that cause heedlessness. For those of us that have done that, we know that this causes harm, that when we take substances, it pollutes our mind, it causes unattentiveness, unalertness, and now we make unwise decisions in our life. We know about gambling, that this is based in craving, but there's other harmful bodily actions too. These are just some of the ones that I drew in from the teachings of the Buddha that he teaches in addition to the 3 under right action. He's just teaching you those 3 in right action because those are the ones associated with the animal realm. And he's looking to help you become a better and better human to get to that first stage of enlightenment. And these are 3 very impactful ones that can have significant unwholesome results for you. Then there's right livelihood. What right livelihood is this is where you're looking to sustain your life by not causing harm to other beings. If you're causing harm to other beings through your livelihood, this harm is going to come back to you. So the Buddha is teaching you to make sure you sustain your life without causing harm to others. And he's helping you see the natural law of karma, of cause and effect, of how you could cause harm to others through your livelihood. So there's something called the first fold of purification, and then there's the second fold of purification. What I'm going to teach you here is the first fold of purification, and then we'll talk about the second fold. The first fold of purification is understanding that if you did any of these livelihoods where you have business in weapons, in living beings, in meat, in substances that cause heedlessness and poisons, this is causing harm to other beings, and harm is going to come back to you. And you can independently verify these things, just like the other ones, the speech and the actions. You can independently verify. If you've done any of these things, you can know that. Or if you know enough about the world, you can look around and you can see, if I was standing on the street corner selling crystal meth into the community, this is causing harm to the community. These people are getting addicted to the substance that I'm selling, and now they're going out to maybe steal or rob or do other unwise things in order to give me money. And that's why standing on the street corner, I can easily get beat up. I can easily get murdered. I can easily get robbed. I can easily get arrested. I can easily get addicted to this substance myself. Right? This is all the unwholesome results coming back to me based on my unwise choice to base my life off of selling a substance that causes heedlessness. But remember, this is the natural law of karma. It functions at a much higher level than the human laws. A human law could tell you, hey, you can work at a cashier at that liquor store. Go ahead. We're not going to arrest you. Go ahead. You would like to work there all day long. Go, work at this liquor store. And you might think like, oh, okay, I'll go work at this liquor store. But if you look at the natural law of karma, these are places that oftentimes get robbed, and people come in and they might beat up the cashier. They might stab the cashier with a knife. They might shoot the cashier and murder this person. And they're oftentimes getting robbed. So you might decide that, oh, it's unwise for me to work at this liquor store, and I'm not interested in that, if you understand the natural law of karma. At the very least, if you're working, say, at a liquor store, at a bar, as a bartender or something like this, at the very least, you're going to be dealing with intoxicated people throughout your entire workday. And now you got to deal with those kinds of individuals who are intoxicated. And I know how I used to be when I was intoxicated. I wouldn't be interested in dealing with myself when I was intoxicated. So why would we be interested to deal with other people, right? It's just not interesting. It's not enjoyable to deal with somebody like that. So if you're interested in creating a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life, if you're constantly having to deal with intoxicated people, you're not going to experience peacefulness and joy in your life. So this natural law of karma is functioning at a much higher level. So you're not interested in just looking at the human laws, because those are imperfect. You would like to look at this natural law, which is a much higher law. So these are 5 livelihoods that you could easily reflect on and see how you would be causing harm, and harm would come back to you. And if you have trouble doing that, let me know and I will help you to be able to do that. Then there's other things in the first fold of purification that the Buddha teaches in order to purify your livelihood. This is about how you conduct your livelihood. If you're scheming, if you're having flattering, hinting, belittling, or pursuing gain with gain, this is going to cause you harm in your livelihood. So let's just say I was a politician. This isn't one of those 5 wrong livelihoods. I'm not harming anyone by being a politician. Maybe I'm a mayor, or maybe I'm a person in parliament who is making laws and stuff like this. I'm not causing any harm. I'm trying to make the community better. But if I'm scheming, if I'm corrupt, now I'm causing harm because I'm doing backhanded deals in order to line my pockets with money, perhaps, or set up my children or my life partner in some fortunate situation because of my power and my influence. Well, now 10, 15 years into this, people find out, and now I can't get reelected. I can't sustain my life. I can't buy food and water and shelter and clothing and things like this because I can't earn a living, because I can't get reelected because I've been scheming, I've been corrupt. Right? So that's why the Buddha is teaching you this. So no matter what you're doing, whatever kind of livelihood you choose, if you were doing scheming, it's going to cause you harm in your livelihood. If you're flattering, this is like insincere comments in order to get people to purchase things from you. If you've ever been in a business and you've walked in, and as soon as you walked in, they're like, oh, you're so handsome, or oh, you're so beautiful. You were probably turned off right away. You're like, I don't know if I'm interested in buying something from this place, right? Because right away they're laying on the flattery just to try to get you to buy something. And if you function like this in your livelihood, you're not going to be able to build up wholesome karma to be successful in that role. What hinting is this is not being clear and direct in your work. Whenever you're presenting a project or something like this to like your boss or anybody else, like a customer, you would like to be clear and concise and direct in your communication, and that's going to produce the best results. Belittling would be to degrade or diminish other people, like your competition or your coworkers or your business partners. If you were doing this kind of thing, it's going to cause harm in your livelihood, and you're going to find it difficult to conduct your livelihood. What pursuing gain would gain is this is where you're just pursuing money. That's all you care about. You don't really care about the job. You're just doing it for money. And if you've ever had a job like that, you probably dragged yourself to work every day. And initially, you might have really enjoyed it because you were making lots and lots of money. But then you got to a point where it just felt so mundane and you were just dragging yourself to work each day, right? And this feels like almost like a dead-end job. It's just, you're just there for the money. You don't really care about the product or the service. And what the Buddha is ultimately helping you to be able to get to is where you have enthusiasm and motivation and encouragement in the work that you do, that you have ambition. That when your feet hit the ground in the morning, wow, it's going to be great to go to work today. Oh man, this is going to be so great, right? When I'm on my way here on my motorbike and it's raining and pouring down raining, I just got a smile on my face. I can't wait to get here. It's like, wow, it's so wonderful. Yeah, it's going to be great to be able to get here and share the teachings with you guys, right? You can get to that point where you're performing a certain livelihood where it's not about the money. You're just doing it because you thoroughly enjoy that work. Sure, you might have a certain paycheck that you're collecting. I don't have a paycheck that I'm collecting, but you might have a paycheck that you're collecting, and that's what you use in order to sustain your life. But that's not what's motivating you to do this work. It's something that you feel very good about, something that you have purpose and ambition and enthusiasm about. Essentially, what the Buddha is doing is he's helping you create this ideal life to see that if you get craving out of the way, if you get anger out of the way, and you get ignorance out of the way, you can create this wonderful life for yourself where you thoroughly enjoy it. But when you're out there chasing after your craving, desires, attachments, you'll take that job that makes the most money. And you'll just take that job. Even though the boss is angry and vicious and hostile, you'll just take it because you want the money. And now, 2 months in, 3 months in, 6 months in, when the money isn't as impactful for you anymore, you'll despise that job, right? So the Buddha is interested in seeing you get to a point where you can be enthused and motivated about your work. Because if you go somewhere 6, 8, 10 hours a day, you would like to enjoy what you're doing. So if you're not in that livelihood now, you can get to that, right? If you're unemployed now, you can get to a livelihood that you feel fully enthused about. In volume 12, chapter 14, you'll see this teachings as well as more comprehensive teachings from the Buddha that is helping you to be able to get to the second fold of purification, where you don't have the fetters involved in your selection of a livelihood. So we could actually select a livelihood based on our ego, for example, or we could select a livelihood based on sensual desire or something like this. But when you get all of that out of the way, using this first fold of purification to help you, but then as you're getting the fetters out of your mind, you'll be able to make a better and better choice about what it is you would like to do as a livelihood to sustain your life. By the time you get to a right livelihood, you'll enjoy the work that you're doing so well that it won't even feel like work. And if for some reason you didn't need to collect a paycheck, you would be completely fine with that. Of course, you're going to need to collect money in order to sustain your life, but that's not the reason why you're doing the work. You just thoroughly enjoy it. And that's what you would ultimately like to get to in your livelihood. So now, just to kind of summarize these under moral conduct, right speech is ensuring that you don't have any harm through your verbal conduct, but paying attention to your communication, your verbal, your text, chat, post, emails, all of this should be harmless as you're communicating. Then right action is making sure you're not causing any harm through your bodily actions, making sure they're harmless. And then the same thing with your livelihood is making sure that you sustain your life in a way that doesn't cause harm to others. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have, if any at all, before we move into the mental discipline, because the mental discipline section is what's going to help you to be able to practice the moral conduct. Without the mental discipline, you wouldn't be able to practice the moral conduct. So does anybody have any questions on the moral conduct section? You have a question? Yeah, go ahead, Helena. For those of you guys online, you can ask questions by putting it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
Thank you, David. I've got 3 questions.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one, please give us tips how to not judge people who are, for example, pedophiles, rapists, terrorists.
Yeah, one of the things that the Buddha says is anytime you see anybody experiencing misfortune or doing unfortunate things, he says you've done those same things in the past, either in this life or some prior life. So it's helpful to not judge someone and look down on them and realize that they are in whatever point they are in the development of their life. And while you may not be choosing to be a pedophile or a rapist, and you realize how unwise that is, have concern for this person's misfortune, that it's so unfortunate that they don't have the wisdom and they don't have the control of their mind to realize how unwise they're being and that they're causing harm. They have such deep craving, such deep anger, and such deep ignorance that they're causing this harm, and they don't even necessarily realize it. They can't control their mind. And it doesn't mean that we just accept that people do these things. Of course, they're going to experience unwholesome karma as a result of their decisions, but it doesn't help you to be angry at them or have judgment towards them, because it's only causing harm to your own mind. And realize that this person is making those decisions, and while you wouldn't make those decisions, the fact that this person is, there's no need for you to put yourself above them. They're just at a different point in their development. And if you think about each life as a sequence, and wherever they are in that sequence, they're still choosing to, be a pedophile or have sex with children or rape. And that's where they're at in their development at this point. And they haven't gotten to the point where they realize that's unwise yet. And that's unfortunate, but it's not something we can control. And it's best to not judge them for what they're doing. Just have concern for their misfortune.
And it's really beautiful. Thanks, Dave. And regarding right speech, how would you talk about, for example, I read that in Somalia, there is a very wide practice of female mutilation and of child marriage. Mm-hmm. And how would you speak about things that seem to be objectively wrong happening in a country or in a culture without slandering, without talking harshly?
How would I think about it? Is that what you're saying?
How would you talk about such things?
How would I talk about it?
Yes.
I don't know that I have a need to talk about it unless somebody asks me a question about it. I know these things occur. I had somebody that I used to work with, and she was explaining to me what they do in these countries. And she was somebody that was potentially going to have that done, and she escaped and got away. And she was explaining to me what it does is that it doesn't allow the woman to have pleasure during sex anymore. I was questioning her, like, why would they do this? And I understand that it's based in craving, anger, and ignorance. Obviously, that's why people are choosing to do that. And the women are being forced to experience this. And that's unwholesome results, right? That's unwholesome karma that's being experienced. But I have no ability to change it or control it or stop it or anything like that. If I was living in one of those countries and somebody was attempting to do those kinds of things to me, I would do the same thing this lady did, which is get out. But of course, not everybody has that ability to get out. So it's unfortunate that there's these practices in place, but this is kind of the things that are left over from human development that, people at different times in history had such a lack of wisdom that they were doing these kinds of things. And that's what the teachings of the Buddha are helping people to understand, that no, there's this higher consciousness that we can get to, that we can evolve to a higher consciousness. We can evolve as a species, just like a lizard or a snake evolves and becomes a better and better species. We can do the same thing. And unfortunately, not everybody's going to evolve at the same rate because of impermanence. Not everybody's going to choose to evolve. There's going to be some people who are hateful or vindictive or do these kinds of things. You've come up with a bunch of examples of this, and there's going to be people like that in the world. But if you focus on what you know is wise, and then if you are able to help in a situation like this, great, help. But that's going to be on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. That really answers the question. I can't imagine someone attacking you for what you've just said. Mm-hmm. All right, and the last one is about gay people, because there are I read that in some Muslim countries, they can get legally killed potentially for being gay. So they don't do harm to anyone. As the mind still has the hard time to understand that in terms of karma, when something negative karma comes at a person who didn't harm anyone.
Yeah, what the decision, because remember, it's always your decisions that's leading to any particular result. The decision that's being made there is, as an individual who maybe prefers same-gender relationships, I am now choosing to live in this country where there's a lot of craving, there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of ignorance. And of course, in those situations, there's some people who can't get out because of financial reasons. But nonetheless, there's a choice there that an individual is choosing to live there, right? If it was me, I would walk and I would just go. And if I needed to be homeless in a neighboring country, but I could still live in freedom, I would just do that. I wouldn't live in an environment where that's sometimes what's happening is someone's clinging to a certain social status or a certain amount of wealth or a job, and they don't feel comfortable to leave because their mind can't let go of that. And now because of their craving and clinging, that's what's leading to the unwholesome results. It's not the choosing to be or not choosing, but it's something that is a preference that somebody has, that the mind has chosen to prefer same-gender relationships, and that's what the person's practicing. And now the thing that's causing the unwholesome results to come back is the craving and clinging and holding on to this place or this money, rather than just leave and go live in a country that's more free, perhaps.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to adjust these air conditions. I don't know if you guys are hot or cold or what, but I see some of you guys covering up. And anybody hot or anybody cold? No? Okay, maybe I'm looking at you guys and it looks like you're kind of bundled up, and I'm kind of trying to help you guys to get comfortable, and you guys are already maybe comfortable. All right. Okay, so we can turn that off. And by the way, all these remotes, they're over there on the back shelf. I'm not the only one that has these remotes. If you guys at any point feel hot or cold, you can go change these things around. But when I kind of see you guys kind of huddled up, I just kind of feel like maybe I need to adjust some things, but it sounds like I don't need to do that. Okay, so this is the moral conduct section. Now we're going to move into the mental discipline section, because all of these factors are actually working together. It's not that you master one before you move on to the other. You're actually dialing all these in at the same time. If you had a speaker system and you had 8 dials, and the more you tweak these dials, you get a better and better quality sound out of the speakers. The same thing is true about the mind, that the more you dial these 8 factors into your life, you're going to get a better and better quality mind. So in order to get to this moral conduct, you first have to cultivate wisdom. Yeah, okay, we've cultivated some wisdom. You guys aren't necessarily practicing this 100% yet, but you're at least starting to understand the wisdom section. Then with that wisdom, we start to understand the moral conduct section. And of course, you're not practicing the moral conduct section perfectly yet, or else you would be close to enlightenment. But that's something you're going to need to dial in more and more. And that comes with remembering it. You need to memorize each individual step. Then you build on top of that the mental discipline, and all this stuff is working together at the same time. So now I'm going to explain to you right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, because that's going to help you to practice the moral conduct. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read this to you, and then I'm going to teach it to you. Or actually, you know what? I'm not going to read it to you. I just looked at the time. We got about 30 minutes before we need to finish. I'm going to just teach this to you, but this is the words of the Buddha, and I usually read it in the foundational classes to help you understand what the Buddha is teaching you here. But what I do is I break it down so that you can see what the Buddha is teaching you. Here's what the Buddha is teaching you under right effort. He's teaching you 4 things. He's teaching you to prevent unwholesome qualities from coming into the mind. He's teaching you any unwholesome qualities that are currently in your mind, to apply the effort to eliminate those out of the mind. He's teaching you any wholesome qualities that are not yet in the mind, to bring those into the mind. And then any wholesome qualities that are currently in the mind, he's saying support those, encourage those, don't allow them to fade. These are the 4 right efforts, because there's certain things in your mind, there's certain things that aren't in your mind right now that are unwholesome, like maybe killing a human being. Farthest thing from your mind right now, not even thinking about it, not remotely even in your mind. And what the Buddha is saying, prevent these kinds of things from ever coming into your mind. And there's other unwholesome things that aren't currently in your mind too. So apply the effort to prevent those from ever coming into the mind. But there's certain unwholesome things that are currently in your mind. You're going to need to apply the effort to abandon those and eliminate those. Then there's certain wholesome things that are not currently in your mind right now. And you're going to need to apply the effort to bring those into the mind. Maybe something like generosity or compassion. You're going to learn about what these things are if you take the foundational classes and so forth, that you're going to need to apply the effort to bring these things into the mind, because these are wholesome qualities that you need to cultivate. And if they're not actually in your mind, you're going to need to bring them into the mind. But then there are certain wholesome qualities that are currently in your mind that you're going to need to support and encourage and not allow them to fade. So for example, loving kindness. You're probably loving and kind in certain relationships that you have. But in other relationships, maybe you're angry or you're hateful or you're bitter. And that's because your loving kindness hasn't been brought to full growth and full perfection. So you're going to need to support that, encourage it, applying effort to support that in the mind and bring it to full growth and full perfection. So this is what the Buddha is teaching you here with right effort, is to apply the effort to prevent unwholesome things from coming into the mind, to eliminate unwholesome things that are currently in the mind, to bring in wholesome qualities into the mind, and to support and encourage the wholesome qualities that are there. I'm just giving you some examples here, and I usually go through all of these in our classes, but it's going to be unique to you. The things that are unwholesome or wholesome that are in your mind, that's going to be unique to you. And in order to be able to practice right effort, you're going to need to practice right mindfulness. This particular step is connected to right effort. You wouldn't be able to apply right effort without right mindfulness. What the Buddha is teaching you in right mindfulness is to have awareness of mind. You're going to need to have awareness of mind in order to purify it. That's what we're talking about in this retreat, is purification of the mind to get to enlightenment. Well, how could you ever purify the mind if you didn't have awareness of it? So you're going to need to build general awareness of the mind. And that's where people usually start when they first get started on the path to enlightenment, because we typically don't have awareness of our mind. We're just kind of plowing through the world, knocking down the trees, burning up the forest. We kind of look behind us and there's a big trail of destruction. We're like, who knocked down all the trees? Who lit the fire? Well, it's us who did that. We just didn't realize it because we didn't have mindfulness. We didn't realize what was going on in our own mind. So the more you practice awareness of mind, you'll be able to have this mindfulness to then apply right effort, because you'll be able to see what is the unwholesome qualities and what are the wholesome qualities. And now you can apply right effort to be able to either eliminate them or bring them in, the wholesome qualities. But then as you're practicing mindfulness more and more closely, you would ultimately like to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. The 4 foundations of mindfulness is what's going to really transform your mind and help you get rid of discontentedness. All these steps are doing that, but right mindfulness is really helping you, because what right mindfulness is doing is it's alerting you to something that's occurring that you may not be aware of. There's this life cycle that discontentedness goes through, that before you get angry, there are some bodily sensations that are happening. Before you get frustrated, before you get fearful or you feel guilt or shame or shyness or jealousy or any of these other discontent feelings, even the pleasant ones, the happiness and excitement, there's some bodily sensation that's happening first. This is an early warning system alerting you that, hey, you're about to get a conditioned feeling. Your mind's about to form a conditioned feeling, and you have an opportunity here that you can cut that off and let it go as a bodily sensation, essentially rewiring the mind to no longer experience conditioned feelings. And if you can cut it off as a bodily sensation, you've just saved yourself a whole lot of trouble, because if you don't get it as a bodily sensation, it's going to then become a feeling. And now your mind's angry, and now you got to get that anger out. Right? So if you miss it as a bodily sensation, you can cut it off as a feeling and get rid of the anger there, but it's a lot harder. So we're not suppressing our feelings here. That's not what the Buddha is teaching you. Sometimes when I teach this, people think you're suppressing your feelings, but instead what you're doing is you're catching it before it actually becomes a feeling. You're catching it as a bodily sensation. So there's this early warning system, like tingling in the body, tightening in the chest, tightening in the throat, heat in the face, maybe pressure in the skull. If you've ever gotten angry, if you haven't been aware of these things, you can start becoming aware of these things, right? And any kind of conditioned feelings, any discontentedness, there's going to be some bodily sensations that you may or may not be aware of right now. The more you pay attention to the bodily sensations, of the discontentedness arising, you can cut it off and let it go as a bodily sensation. Because this early warning system is alerting you. Your mind's telling you, hey, I'm about to get a conditioned feeling here. I'm about to form a conditioned feeling. I'm about to get a conditioned feeling, right? And if you do nothing about it, your mind's going to be like, conditioned feeling. I'm so happy. I'm so excited. Or, oh, I'm so angry. I'm so sad. I'm so frustrated. And now your mind's dwelling in that feeling. But if you can cut that off before it becomes a feeling, you've just restrained the mind and you're going to rewire your mind. Slowly but surely, your mind won't get conditioned feelings anymore. You'll only ever experience peace and joy and unconditioned happiness because you're not forming your inner feelings based on some condition, right? So when you're noticing any conditioned feeling arising as a bodily sensation, you'd like to cut it off and let it go. So if you're sitting there watching the news and you're noticing the frustration starting to come and you start noticing this tingling sensation in the body, cut off the news, redirect the mind, go outside for a walk. Cut that off and let it go. Don't allow the mind to dwell and sit there, because as long as you allow that to happen, your mind's going to get this feeling of anger. And now you got to deal with the anger. Well, you're not going to be able to catch it as a bodily sensation every time, because if you're just getting started on the path, then your mind isn't well trained yet. So you're not going to be able to cut it off every time. It is going to become a feeling. And now when it's a feeling, you can also cut it off there. Right? So work to cut it off there. If you don't cut it off as a feeling, it's going to affect the condition of the mind. If you've ever been grumpy for a few hours or a few days, or if you've ever been agitated or irritated for like a week or two, this is because you didn't know about the bodily sensations and you didn't cut it off there. You didn't cut it off as a feeling, and now it lingered around, and now you have this general irritability for like a week or two. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yep, you experienced it, right? We all did, right? So you can cut it off there too. So if you're like an hour or two or three, and you're just noticing this general irritability, hold on a second, snap out of that, right? Just let it go. Hey, let it go. There's some craving that the mind has, just let it go. Don't allow the mind to dwell there. And then what's happening is the mind is forming and fulfilling these mental objects, that now the mind is holding on to these mental objects. These are deeply rooted containers in the mind where the mind is being polluted by these mental objects. All these 10 fetters that we're going to be talking about during this retreat are mental objects. This is what you're purifying the mind of. And you're going to need to have awareness of these mental objects. Not only the bodily sensations, not only the feelings, not only the condition of the mind, but you're going to need to have awareness of these mental objects. And that's why when I teach you the 10 fetters, I'm going to teach you what it is, and then I'm going to teach you the symptoms. Because if you can see the symptoms, that's having awareness of the mental objects. That's what you're trying to accomplish. Because when you see the symptoms of the mental objects coming up, you can take action and cut that off and let it go. That's what you would like to accomplish, right? So when you build awareness of all of these and you're able to put a blockade on the bodily sensations and no longer allow the mind to experience conditioned feelings, and then at the same time you're purifying the mind of these mental objects and getting those out of the mind, this is what's going to produce your enlightenment. That's why mindfulness is so important. So if you're just starting out, you might start out with awareness of mind, but more and more you're going to need to know what the 4 foundations of mindfulness are and get deeper into it so you can plug into this and cut off and let go as a bodily sensation and then purify these mental objects and get rid of them. Okay? Just reading this. Yeah, okay. Did you guys read this? I created this about 3 months ago. And for this part right here, normally in the regular classes, I teach this part right here, but I added this in here. Let me read it. All the 10 fetters that we will be discussing in this retreat are mental objects. Purification of the mind to attain enlightenment occurs through cleansing it of all the 10 fetters. This is what I was just saying. The unwholesome mental objects through the tools and techniques shared by the Buddha. A combination of proactive training and in-the-moment training by practicing right mindfulness and applying right effort is what will cleanse the mind of the 10 fetters to produce enlightenment. Yeah, this is what I just said, right? I put it in here to make sure I talked about it in this retreat because I don't usually talk about this in an introductory course, but I was interested to be sure that I focused on this, that this is what we're doing during this retreat, is helping you to understand these mental objects. And that way you can purify the mind of them and actually experience enlightenment. So you might be developing this. This might be where you're at. You might just be developing awareness of mind, and that's fine. Everybody's got to start somewhere, and that's where you start. But as you get better and better at that, then you start developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, starting to get awareness of the bodily sensations, the feelings, and the condition of the mind. And then you ultimately get into a retreat like this, where you're starting to learn the mental objects, which is the 10 fetters, so you can purify the mind of those. And that's what I'm sharing down here. Okay, and now there's right concentration. This is the last step. This is where you're focusing the mind and you're developing the mind with concentration. Here, what the Buddha is teaching you is he's teaching you the jhanas. These are preliminary phases that your mind goes through before you experience the first stage of enlightenment. And we've got a class during this retreat where I'm going to teach you all about the jhanas, and I'm going to actually read this for you and help you understand what the jhanas are. Essentially, for now, just understand them as preliminary phases that the mind experiences before the first stage of enlightenment. But tomorrow, I'm going to teach you what these jhanas are in detail. But now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share with you how to practice right concentration and how to develop it. Because in other parts of the teachings of the Buddha, he describes what right concentration is and how to practice it. So that's what I'm summarizing here for you. There's 2 aspects of right concentration. There's developing your meditation practice and practicing singleness of mind. So that breathing mindfulness meditation that we do, that's part of your right concentration. Because when you're focused on the breath and the mind moves off the breath and you cut that off and let it go, you're eliminating craving, desire, attachment. Because remember, the Eightfold Path is to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So that's why breathing mindfulness meditation is part of right concentration, because every time you have to let go and come back to the breath, let go and come back to the breath, that's training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment so you can restrain the mind. So when you run into that shoe store and you've just got to have that brand new pair of shoes that came out, but you're thinking like, I've got 30 pairs of shoes at home. Why do I need one more pair of shoes? You can restrain your mind. You can realize like, no, this is just a craving. I don't need those shoes. They're not going to make my life better. I've already got 30 pairs of shoes at home. I share this because I used to be into shoes. I used to have a lot of shoes, right? I used to buy shoes after shoes after shoes after shoes. There was one more pair of shoes, right? But then ultimately you realize, how many pairs of shoes can I wear at one time, right? I don't need 31 pairs of shoes. So maybe I'm going to not buy that pair of shoes, right? Now I don't have 30 pairs of shoes anymore. I just have one pair that I wear each day. But nonetheless, this is what the mind can do with craving. It can be very expensive to pursue your cravings, right? Your mind's just chasing after all this pleasure, and you can actually go into debt in this kind of situation. So this breathing mindfulness meditation is teaching you to restrain the mind and pull it back, because every time it moves off the breath, you pull it back. The goal of this meditation isn't to eliminate your thoughts. The goal is to notice your thoughts sooner and sooner. That's your mindfulness. And to also have concentration by focusing on the breath, and then to be able to easily let go. Even an enlightened being will have thoughts during their meditation, but they're going to notice them sooner and sooner, and they're going to be able to let them go easier and easier. That's what you would ultimately like to get to. So that's what your breathing mindfulness meditation is doing for you. And then, of course, you're going to need loving kindness meditation, which I'm going to teach you as well. And then there's those 2 specialized meditations of eliminating sexual cravings and to eliminate the personal existence view, the meditation to realize non-self. Those are on an as-needed basis. When you first get started, you focus on breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation, and you build that up in your practice. And you'd like to build up to 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more. Then the second part of developing concentration is to practice singleness of mind, where you just do one thing at a time. One of the things that the mind has, which is unknowing of true reality, is we think that we can multitask. This wasn't a thing until about the 1960s. In the 1960s, when computers came out, all of a sudden people started talking about multitasking, because computers can multitask. It's a machine. It's got a computer chip. It's got multiple processors. It can do multiple things at one time. So then when computers came out, human beings were like, oh, we can be computers. Let's multitask. And people started teaching this. But you actually aren't multitasking. What you're doing is you're actually doing one thing at a time, and your mind is rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing to thing. So if you're on the phone, you're watching TV, and you're eating a sandwich, you're actually not doing all of these things at the same time. You're talking to your mom for 3, 4, 5, 10 seconds, then your mind's rapidly cycling to watch TV, and now you're rapidly cycling to eat the sandwich. And if you're doing this at work, where your mind's rapidly cycling and bouncing around from thing to thing to thing, when you get home, you might find it very challenging to relax. Right? The mind can be overactive and stressed and having anxiety. It's almost like a racehorse. If you've ever been to a horse racetrack, horses that run around the track, and that's what they do for a living, when they're done with their race, they can't calm down. When they're in the stall, they're like really like go, 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 go. They're like really hyped up, because that's what the way that their mind is just taught to go, 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 just run, 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 run. So if that's what you do to your mind all day long, you're just go, 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 go. When you get home, you'll find it very challenging to rest and relax. So you would like to do just one thing at a time. If you're talking on the phone to mom, just talk to mom. Just have a great conversation with mom. See, we think we're actually accomplishing more by talking to mom, watching TV, and eating the sandwich, but we're not accomplishing more, because this conversation that would probably be 10, 15, 20 minutes, now it's 45 minutes or an hour. And now we used wrong speech, and we said something we shouldn't have said. And now we got to call mom up and apologize and tell her, oh, I'm so sorry. Or maybe we agreed to something to mom, that we were going to do something, and now we totally forgot what that was. And now we got to call her back and say, Mom, I'm so sorry, I forgot. What am I supposed to do for you again? I know you gave me like 3 things to do. Can you just tell me those things again? Right? So we actually think that we're being more productive by doing multiple things, but you're actually spending more time to go back and clean this up. So if you're looking to bring forth right speech, you're going to need right concentration. So that's why you're interested in doing just one thing at a time. So if you're washing dishes and your mind wanders, cut that off and let it go, and bring the mind back to washing dishes. Or if you're in a business meeting and the mind wanders, cut that off and let it go, and bring the mind back. And more, your mind will stay in the middle. It'll be focused. The analogy that I give to help you understand this is that if you had a piece of wood and you had a steel rod and you grinded that steel rod back and forth, when you first start doing this, the steel rod's going to bounce around a lot. And that might be what your mind's doing right now. Your mind might be bouncing around. But the more you grind this steel rod back and forth on the wood, you're going to get a deeper and deeper groove, and it's going to be harder and harder for that to pop out. And when it does pop out, you're going to notice it and be able to bring it right back to the groove. But eventually, you're going to get such a deep groove in this wood, the steel rod will never pop out. It'll just always stay there. Right? And that's what you can accomplish. Whereas if you allow the mind to multitask, or at least it thinks it's multitasking, it's just going to keep bouncing around. But the more that you train it to be in the middle and you get this deep groove, your mind will just always be focused. It'll be impossible for it to bounce around. And this is what you would ultimately like to accomplish, where you can be focused and concentrated and clear. And one of the things that you're doing to train with that is right now, listening to my voice. If you're listening to me and you're just paying attention to what I'm sharing, you're just doing one thing at a time. But of course, if you are on the phone, if you're thinking about what you're going to have for dinner tonight, if you're thinking about something else, your mind's wandering. Wherever you see that happening, cut that off and let it go, and bring your mind back to the conversation that we're having right here. So by listening to the teachings of the Buddha on a continuous ongoing basis like this, you're actually refining your mind and you're practicing right concentration. And wherever you see your mind wandering, cut that off and let it go. So the last thing you're interested in doing is having a YouTube video playing in the background while you're writing out an email, right? This is just taking the mind and switching back and forth. If you're watching a YouTube video and an email comes in, just press pause and look at your email if you'd like. Address the email and now go back to your YouTube video. But if you're trying to multitask, the mind's just flipping back and forth and you're not practicing right concentration. So what the Buddha teaches you, that if you're walking, know that you're walking. If you're eating, know that you're eating. If you're sitting, know that you're sitting. So we might say, if you're watching TV, just watch TV. If you're talking to your mom, just talk to your mom. If you're writing out an email, just write out an email, right? That's what you would like to do, is just one thing at a time. And this will be practicing singleness of mind. And these two things together are going to hone your mind, and you're going to develop right concentration. Okay, so now just to summarize this a bit, Is right effort is taking the initiative to eliminate unwholesome aspects of the mind and cultivate wholesome qualities in the mind. This is taking the effort to do that, right? You're going to need to apply effort. It's not just going to happen by itself. Right mindfulness is having awareness of mind, but more specifically, practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Being aware of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. Then there's right concentration, practicing meditation and developing singleness of mind until the mind starts experiencing the jhanas. The jhanas is where you're starting to experience certain qualities of mind that are starting to flicker, and then you're starting to experience some of the qualities of this improved state of mind, of having put together the Eightfold Path. And we're going to talk about this tomorrow. The way that you develop right concentration is through practicing breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, and practicing singleness of mind in day-to-day life. Just doing one thing. And then you can be very focused and very concentrated. So any questions on either the mental discipline section or any other aspect of the Eightfold Path? Yes, Roxanne.
Yeah, I was just wondering about singleness of mind. What do you do when you're out to dinner with a group of people? Mm-hmm. And there's food and conversation and background noise and all of that going on at the same time?
Sure. So what you're doing is when you're sitting at the table and it's time for you to eat, you're eating that particular scoop of food, right? And now you're chewing the food. And then when it's time to talk, you talk, right? So you're doing just one thing at a time, where we know that if we're chewing food and we're trying to talk, this is where we choke. That's our unwholesome karma. Or if we're walking down the street and we're talking on the phone or we're text messaging, people have walked out in front of a car, they're dead right now, because they didn't know about singleness of mind. Whereas if they practice singleness of mind where they're just walking down the street, they'd still be alive because they would have saw that car coming. This is the unwholesome karma, and that's where you can see the Buddha is not teaching you rules and commandments. He's teaching you how to live this better way of life. So if you're walking down the street and you got a friend there and you're talking to it, you're focused on walking. And now you're just focused on walking. And then when you're talking, but the body can do more than one thing at a time, but the mind can only be at one place at a time. So I can rub the top of my head and I can rub my belly. The hands can do that. The body can do 2 things at a time, but the mind can only be in one place at a time. So you would like your mind only be at one place at a time. So if the mind is focused on talking, you focus on talking. But if the mind is focused on walking, then you focus on walking. But the body can actually be walking while the mind is focused on talking. So that's doing one thing at a time, because the mind is only doing one thing. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Are there any easy-to-go questions that you could recommend for us to practice mindfulness? Like, for example, what is the body feeling? Should I ask myself several times a day just to check up?
So the way that you're developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness is in your meditation. Your breathing mindfulness meditation is helping you to develop the 4 foundations. So when you're in meditation and you have that itch that comes up and you want to itch it, you're just stay focused on the breath. You're aware of the itch, but you understand it's impermanent. And in your mind, you just cut off and let go of that urge to itch it. Now, of course, when you're first getting started, you might just have to hurry up and itch it after 5 seconds or so, but you'd like to extend that longer and longer. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you see the whole life cycle of this itch, that it arises, it changes, and it fades away, and it didn't affect your mind. You were aware of it in your mind, but you didn't take action to actually itch it. So this is how you're developing the 4 foundations. The bodily sensations that we're talking about in the right mindfulness, it's not the itching, it's the arising of discontent feelings, but the way that you cultivate awareness of the body is through when you're in meditation and you're noticing the itching. And this is why you can experience a lot of itching even in your day-to-day life, as those things were probably happening in the past, but your mind just wasn't aware of it. As you're becoming more and more aware and you're starting to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness, you can start becoming more aware of itches. And all throughout your day, you can just be kind of itching, and you kind of go through this period where your mind just becomes more and more aware of the body in meditation, but then also outside of meditation too. You become more and more aware of the body. So the bodily sensations that you were looking to get aware of is the ones that are the early warning system alerting you that discontentedness is arising. But you're also going to notice these itches because the mind becomes more aware of what's going on in the body.
Okay, thank you. Is there time for one more question? Oh.
Yeah.
So my sister is a young mom. She's staying at home right now, pregnant with her second baby, and she multitasks a lot. And
She does what?
Multitasks a lot.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
So how could she maintain the singleness of mind if she has to do some ironing and watch the kid at the same time?
What I would do is I put the iron board right in front of the child. Like, say the child's over there in the living room playing, I would put the ironing board right in the living room, and I just sit there and iron. So I'm like right there in front of the child. So I'm looking at the clothes ironing, but then I can look up, and now I can iron some more. Then I can look up. So I'm stopping the iron and I'm looking up, because if you're looking at the child and you're ironing, that's when you break something or you burn yourself from not practicing singleness of mind. That's your unwholesome karma. So the natural law of karma is the most unbiased teacher you'll ever find. It's going to show you every second when you're making wise decisions and when you're making unwise decisions. And if you pay attention to it, it'll show you. So if you're ironing and you end up burning yourself, you can look and be like, oh my goodness, I wasn't practicing singleness of mind, and that's why this happened. That's my unwholesome karma. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
I was just going to share something about the singleness of mind too. From living in America and from the job that I had, I have a real craving for efficiency, because in my job especially, was constantly having to find a way to fit everything in, and they were constantly giving us way too much on our plates. And so I've always told you that since I've started studying with you, I pay more attention to how Thai people behave and how their behavior makes more sense to me now that I know these things. Because I used to get, before I started practicing better, I used to get really aggravated when Thai people would do certain things, because I would be craving for efficiency and for them to do things faster, or seeing how I could have made it faster and more efficient. And they're very methodical and very single-minded with what they're doing. But I am aware of that now, and having to switch how I'm thinking, especially living here compared to America.
Yeah, you'll see it works so much better, single-threadedly. And you can even practice singleness of mind even in a place like America, since I know your occupation. Like, say you're at the bedside with a patient, you're just at the bedside with the patient and dealing with whatever you're dealing with there. You're not thinking about the next patient, or you're not thinking about getting the medication for the next patient. You're just dealing with the patient in front of you, and you don't allow your mind to go somewhere else. And you're not used to this, or the mind's not trained to do this, but this is what you can train to do. And now for that 3 minutes that you're with that patient, you just focus on that. And then when you're done, boom, you're off to the next thing. Now you're standing in front of the medication, and you need to find this medication for the next patient. You just focus on that medication. And this is where people in your profession have gotten into a lot of difficulties, that they've maybe given the wrong medication to the wrong patient, and now they've caused some pretty significant harm. Whereas if you practice singleness of mind in an occupation like you have, you'll perform it much better. But it'll feel odd to you because you're just not used to it. And other people won't even necessarily know, because you actually will be more effective. You'll actually be more productive by doing things single-threadedly. We think that we're actually being more successful when we're trying to multitask, but we're stumbling over our feet and we're making so many mistakes that we have to clean that stuff up. Whereas if you're doing things single-threadedly, you're actually being more effective and more efficient in the way that you're doing things, because each individual thing, you're doing it well, and you don't have to go back and clean it up. You're doing this 3 minutes with this patient really, really well, and then you're moving off to the next thing. And now you're doing that really, really well, no mistakes, complete wholesome karma, and now you move to the next thing. And now you just do that all throughout your day. But you need to get more and more used to doing that, because it's going to feel odd and it's going to feel weird when you first start doing it, because your mind's not used to doing it. And now this is change that your mind doesn't like.
Feels impossible right now. I understand that there probably is a way. I probably want to talk to you about it more, because just thinking about my job gives me anxiety. And I know that I'm going to have to go back at some point. So maybe I'll talk to you about that privately, about how to figure that out.
Sure. And that's where the meditation is helping you too, right? If you're not meditating in this way that the Buddha taught, it'll be very hard to practice singleness of mind. So all of this stuff needs to accumulate and experience more and more benefits and more results. You're not going to be able to just go out the door and instantly start practicing these things. But the more you integrate this stuff in, the easier it'll become. Yeah, sure. Can you get a mic? Oh, okay. That's to you. Yeah. Yeah, maybe you need a change of job. You might need to look at that. Okay, let me check to see if we have any questions online here. I see all you guys there online. Let me see if we have anything coming in. And I'm not seeing anything anywhere. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is just end here by thanking all of you guys for joining, and let you know that tomorrow I'm going to be sharing some more with you. I'll just show you here what I'm going to be teaching you tomorrow. Is tomorrow morning we're going to do breathing mindfulness meditation in the walking position. That's what we're going to start with. And then after that, we will learn the jhanas. I'm going to teach you all about the jhanas. After that, I'm going to go into more detail about the 4 stages of enlightenment, helping you to understand those a bit more, going into more detail with those. Then we have an excursion tomorrow. If you guys would like to go to the elephant sanctuary, I let them know that we have 6 people, and they're going to be here at 1:30 to pick people up. Remember, I negotiated an 800 baht for that. Normally it's 1,600 baht. So they're probably going to pick you up with other people in the van. And I don't know what the other people are paying, but they may not be paying 800 baht. So this is something that they're giving to our group, is this 800 baht fee. And then they're going to bring you back here in time for the evening, which at 6:30, after the elephant sanctuary, if you guys like to go, then in the evening, I'm going to be doing walking meditation. You guys will be doing that. And then I'm going to teach you about the first fetter. This is where we're now going to, each individual class, we're going to go fetter by fetter. I'll explain to you what it is, the symptoms, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've eliminated it. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow evening. So thank you all for joining. And as you guys depart, if you guys could just keep in mind that we're at somebody's home. The monks are here probably getting ready to sleep or already headed to bed. So as we head out, if you guys could just keep that in mind, that would be wonderful. And I'll perhaps see you guys tomorrow morning. Okay? Have a lovely evening, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay?